Hello. Hi, Shark. Welcome to this. Oh, I just felt my collarbone just snap. Was that my collarbone? My backbone. Sorry, I just kind of waking up. Sorry. Well, not so much waking up. I already did wake up like a while ago. So yeah. Give me a second. No, there's nothing going on today. So I've been, well, being slightly lazy and also a bit tired because I slept at like 1 a.m. instead of like 3, so it just screwed up my clock internally. Yeah, I'm probably mumbling to myself. I have a cup of tea with me right now, and I'm probably gonna... You know what? I just realized I put my cup to like the left side, and my cup here is on the right, so the left. I put my cup on the right side of my actual computer, streaming setup, and my cup is here. So fresh face, yeah, something like that. That's like I wanted to make sure that you guys don't end up like having someone who's just falling asleep. I feel like I will, but now I should be able to just you know, actually just yeah, there you go. In case I fall asleep, I'm going to do like a loud neck snap like this. Hold on. You couldn't see like that action because I had no hands on this model, and yeah, I kind of just snapped my neck like. It didn't snap anything to place, but it hurts like a bitch. So how are you guys doing today? It's Friday actually. I don't usually do my reading streams on Fridays because that's just usually reserved for game, but why not? My bad. Saka. Gomene Mux. I am sneezing. So yes, let me just... I don't really want to advertise this anywhere, so yeah. Basically, they okay, I guess. That's good, that's good. I mean, like, how is it okay? I don't know. I really... I ask vague questions, I get vague answers. Bless you. Thank you so much. That's just on me. I have no sense of, what is it called already? I don't remember. Anyway, just for slight information before I start reading, let me just recap. I'll pull up the reading rules as usual for those who are new and coming into the stream. So this is my reading stream. Hello, welcome. This is what I'll be doing. So look on top. The reading stream will have, like, I'll read a selected story uninterrupted for a chapter, and after the chapter ends, I'll take a 5 minutes break or 10, depending. And then after that, that's it. Nothing else. I'll just talk about the story and whatnot. And for those who are not in the know for War of the Worlds, we are now in book 2 of The Earth Under the Martians. Also, if you don't notice, my mod is sleep. Congratulations to my moderator Akate for receiving his second dose of receiving his second vaccination dose for COVID. So yes, he's resting today. Bless his heart. My moderator does so much for me. It's so sad because I don't even do much for him in return. Anyway, okay, so very kept off. We're now book 2, The Earth Under the Martians. How many chapters are there? Book 1 has like... Let me just check actually. Book 1 has 17 chapters. Book 2 has... Yeah, he did. Don't worry about it. Book 2 seems to have around... What is it already? I saw it. I don't know. 8 chapters? 9 chapters? I think it's 9 chapters. So book 2 I have 9 chapters. Maybe we can finish it up in the next few streams. So yeah, it's very interesting. I've been reading this story for a very long time, and to imagine that all the reading streams in the future are going to be even longer, because I'm definitely not going to read a book, well, a book that's relatively this short. And yeah. So just before I move on, I wanted to talk about something, and that something is this week's Blood Dragon stream, because I realized my model was bugging out and my eyes keep closing again, and I think I actually need to tone down the brightness of the screen. Maybe this will help with the brightness issue, because it seems like I'm starting to squint my eyes a lot whenever I look at the screen, or I'm just not paying attention to the camera. It's slightly irritating, but I just realized this is what I've been doing for like the longest time. Yeah, the model was super laggy. My voice was good. So I'm not sure what to do about the model lagging. I believe it's just because the game takes a lot of resources while streaming. So yes, I apologize for that, anyone, because I don't think it'll be. I don't think it's fun just walking to, like, for any new time streamers just walking in and the model is just like, just basically freezing like that, even though you can hear my voice crispy clear. So maybe I'll try running VTube Studio in admin mode. Maybe that will help actually. And yeah, I also want to do, like, you guys probably understand why, like those who are coming back, like you, Shark. But for new viewers, it just comes off as off-putting and very jarring. Maybe I should start investing in a new iPhone. I don't know. I really apologize for the spurt of technical issues, because yeah, as much as I want to say, yeah, it's fun, it's just part of the VTubing thing and being scuffed. I don't like being scuffed. I'm constant with my stream schedules, but apparently the one thing I can't keep consistent is that my streams are actually functional. Because I see my other streamers, and while I'm not affected by other streamers in a way that is negative, I mean, like, of course I'm gonna try and be as good as them. My other streamers also have very good rigs, or at least just like a setup that actually works for them. So yes, if they can stream with their VTubing models well, or their characters well, why can't I? Basically, that's just that's the memo for low intensity games and for stuff like Monster Hunter Stories. I guess if there's nothing going on, yeah, sure, why not? But for Blood Dragon, yeah, maybe I'll just tone down either the game settings and run an admin mode, so the game might seem quite fuzzy. Because as I remember, the game just works perfectly fine. My model is just the one that's glitching out. I'm pretty sure I also observed it in Jurassic World Evolution, so yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah. It's a learning struggle, just looking back at your VOD, just realizing, oh wow, your character just lags like shit. God dang, son. Okay, so what else am I gonna say? Well, no, there's nothing more, so let me just, I'm rubbing the book right now. I'm rubbing the book cover because I've been reading this book the last few weeks with you guys, and I have been stoked with the book. And every time I grab the book, it's like a warm, fuzzy feeling because I know I'm gonna be reading it with the mercenaries. Yeah, now we're reaching the post-apocalypse. Thanks, son. Yeah, it's hardcover. I can hug it even more. Okay, so I'm just gonna turn off the music right now. Okay, so remember those coming in, hi, welcome to my streams. This is now the War of the World streams. I won't be recording this as usual, but I have compiled these streams into one playlist so you guys can listen to it easily, or not, I guess. Kind of consider, because you have to go through my half-desk reading. But it's okay. Let me just start before we go any further, because it's almost like 3:15. Alright, give me a second. Okay, there we go. Alright, so we're starting with book 2. So book 2, Underfoot. You guys ready? Let's start in 3, 2, 1. In the first book, I have wandered so much from my own adventures to tell of the experiences of my brother that all through the last 2 chapters, I and the curate have been lurking in the empty house at Halliford, whither we fled to escape the black smoke. There I will resume. We stopped there all Sunday night and all the next day, the day of the panic, in a little island of daylight, cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. We could do nothing but wake in an aching inactivity during those 2 weary days. My mind was occupied by anxiety for my wife. I figured her at Leatherhead, terrified, in danger, mourning me already as a dead man. I paced the rooms and cried aloud when I thought of how I was cut off from her, of all that might happen to her in my absence. My cousin I knew was brave enough for any emergency, but he was not the sort of man to realize danger danger quickly to rise promptly. What was needed now was not bravery, but circumspection. My only consolation was to believe that the Martians were moving Londonward and away from her. Such vague anxieties kept the mind sensitive and painful. I grow very weary and irritable with the curate's perpetual ejaculations. I tired of the sight of his selfish despair. After some ineffectual remonstrance, I kept away from him, staying in the room. Was it evidently a children's schoolroom containing globes, forms, and copybooks. When he followed me thither, I went to a box room at the top of the house, and in order to be left alone with my aching miseries, locked myself in. We were hopelessly hemmed in by the black smoke all that day and the morning of the next. There were signs of people in the next house on Sunday evening, a face at the window and the moving lights, and later the slamming of a door. But I do not know who these people were, nor what became of them. We saw nothing of them the next day. The black smoke drifted slowly riverward all through Monday morning, creeping nearer and nearer to us, driving at last along the roadway outside the house that hid us. A Martian came across the fields about midday, slaying the stuff with a jet of superheated steam that hissed against the walls, smashed all the windows it touched, and scalded the curate's hands as he fled out the front room. When at last we crept across the southern rooms and looked out again, the country northward was as though a black snowstorm had passed over it. Looking towards the river, we were astonished to see an unaccountable redness mingling with the black of the scorched meadows. For a time we did not see how this change affected our position, save that we were relieved of our fear of the black smoke. But later I perceived that we were no longer hemmed in, and that now we might get away. So soon as I realized that the way of escape was open, my dream of action returned. But the curate was lethargic, unreasonable. "We are safe here," he repeated. "Safe here." I resolved to leave him. Would that I had! Wiser now for the artilleryman's teaching. I sought out food and drink. I had found oil and rags for my burns, and I also took a hat and a flannel shirt that I found in one of the bedrooms. When it was clear to him that I meant to go out alone, had reconciled myself to going alone, he suddenly roused himself to come. And, all being quiet throughout the afternoon, we started about 5 o'clock, as should I judge, along the blackened road to Sunbury. In Sunbury, at intervals along the road, were dead bodies lying in contorted attitudes, horses as well as men, overturned carts and luggage, all covered thickly with black dust. That pall of cindery powder made me think of what I had read of the destruction of Pompeii. We got to Hampton Court without misadventure, our minds full of strange and unfamiliar appearances. And at Hampton Court our eyes were relieved to find a patch of green that had escaped the suffocating drift. We went through Bushy Park, with its deer going to and fro under the chestnuts, and some men and women hurrying in the distance towards Hampton. And so we came to Twickenham. These were the first people we saw. Away across the roads, beyond Ham and Petersham, were still afire. Twickenham was uninjured by either heat ray or black smoke, and there were more people about here, though none could give us news. For the most part they were like ourselves, taking advantage of a lull to shift their quarters. I have an impression that many of these houses here were still occupied by scared inhabitants, too frightened even for flight. Here, too, the evidence of a hasty rout was abundant along the road. I remember most vividly 3 smashed bicycles in a heap, pounded into the roads by the wheels of subsequent carts. We crossed Richmond Bridge about 8:30. We hurried across the exposed bridge, of course, but I noticed floating down the stream a number of red masses, some many feet across. I did not know what these were. There were no time for scrutiny, and I put a more horrible interpretation on them than they deserved. Here again on the Surrey side were black dust that had once been smoked, and dead bodies, a heap near the approach to the Black Station. But we had no glimpse of the Martians until we were some way towards Barnes. Sorry, my phone is like making Yoda noises because I set my alarm at like 3:20 for exercise. So let's continue. We saw in the blackened distance a group of 3 people running down the street towards the river, but otherwise it seemed deserted. Up the hill, Richmond town was burning briskly. Outside the town of Richmond, there was no trace of the black smoke. Then, suddenly, as we approached Q, came a number of people running, and the upper works of a Martian fighting machine loomed in sight over the housetops, not 100 yards away from us. We stood aghast at our danger, and had the Martian looked down we must have immediately have perished. We were so terrified that we dared not go on, but turned aside and hid in a shed in a garden. There the curate crouched, weeping silently, and refusing to stir again. But my fixed idea of reaching Leatherhead would not let me rest, and in the twilight I ventured out again. I went through a shrubbery, and along a passage beside a big house standing in its own grounds, and so emerged upon the roads towards Q. The curator I left in the shed, but he came hurrying after me. The second start was the most foolhardy thing I ever did, for it was manifest the Martians were about us. No sooner had the curate overtaken me than we saw either the fighting machine we had seen before or another, far away across the meadow in the direction of Q Lodge. 4 or 5 little black figures hurried before it across the green grey field, and in a moment it was evident this Martian pursued them. In 3 great strides he was among them, and he ran radiating from his feet in all directions. He used no heat ray to destroy them, but picked them up one by one. Apparently he tossed them into a great metallic carrier, which projected behind him, much as a workman's basket hangs over his shoulder. It was the first time I realized that the Martians might have any other purpose than destruction with defeated humanity. We stood at the moat for a moment petrified, then turned and fled through a gate behind us into a walled garden. Fell into, rather than found, a fortunate ditch, and lay there, scarce daring to whisper to each other until the stars were out. I suppose it was nearly 11 o'clock before we gathered courage to start again, no longer venturing into the road, but sneaking along hedgerows and through plantations, and watching keenly through the darkness, he on the right and I on the left, for the Martians, who seemed to be all about us. In one place we blundered upon a scorched and blackened area, now cooling and ashen, and a number of scattered dead bodies of men, burnt horribly about the head and trunks, but with their legs and boots mostly intact, and of dead horses, 50 feet perhaps, behind a line of 4 ripped gun and smashed gun carriages. Sheen, it seemed, had escaped destruction, but the place was silent and deserted. Here we happened on no dead, but though the night was too dark for us to see into the side roads of the place. In Sheen, my companion suddenly complained of faintness and thirst, and we decided to try one of the houses. The first house we entered, after a little difficulty with the window, was a small detached villa, and I found nothing eatable left in the place but some moldy cheese. There was, however, some water to drink, and I took a hatchet, which promised to be useful in our next housebreaking. We then crossed to a place where the road turns towards Mortlake. Here there stood a white house within a walled garden, and in the pantry of this domicile we found a store of food, 2 loaves of bread in a pan, an uncooked steak, and a half the ham. I gave this catalogue so precisely because, as it happened, we were destined to subsist upon this store for the next fortnight. Bottled beer stood under a shelf, and there were 2 bags of haricot beans and some limp lettuces. This pantry opened into some kind of wash-up kitchen, and in this was firewood. There was also a cupboard, which we found nearly a dozen burgundy, tin soups and salmon, and 2 tins of biscuit. We sat in the adjacent kitchen in the dark, for we dared not strike a light, and ate bread and ham, and drank beer out of the same bottle. The curate, who was still timorous and restless, was now, oddly enough, for pushing on, and I was urging him to keep up his strength by eating, when the thing happened that was to imprison us. can't be midnight yet, I said. Then came a blinding glare of vivid light, green light. Everything in the kitchen leapt out, clearly visible in green and black, then vanished again. And then followed such a concussion as I never heard before or since. So close on the heels of this as to seem instantaneous, came a thud behind me, a clash of glass, a crash and rattle of falling masonry all about us, and the plaster of the ceiling came down upon us, smashing into a multitude of fragments upon our heads. I was knocked headlong across the floor against the oven handle and stunned. I was insensible for a long time, the curate told me, and when I came to, we were in darkness again, and he, with a face wet, as I found afterwards, with blood from a cut forehead, was dabbing water over me. For some time I could not recollect what had happened. Then things came to me slowly. A bruise on my temple asserted itself. "Are you better?" asked the curate in a whisper. At last I answered him. I sat up. "Don't move," he said. "The floor is covered with smashed crockery from the dresser. You can't possibly move outside without making a noise, and I fancy they are outside." We both sat quite silent, so that we could scarcely hear each other breathing. Everything seemed so deadly still, but once something near us, some plaster of broken brickwork, slid down with a rumbling sound. Outside and very near was an intermittent metallic rattle. "That," he said the curate, when presently it happened again. "Yes," I said. "What is it?" "A Martian," said the curate. I listened again. "It's not like the heat ray," I said, and for a time I was inclined to think one of the great fighting machines had stumbled against the house, as I had seen one stumble against the tower of Shepperton's church. Our situation was so strange and incomprehensible that for 3 or 4 hours, until the dawn came, we were scarcely moved, and then the light filtered in, not through the window, which remained black, but through a triangular aperture between a beam and a heap of broken bricks in the wall behind us. The interior of the kitchen we now saw greyly for the first time. The window had been burst by a mass of garden mold, which flowed on over the table upon which we had been sitting and lay about our feet. Outside, the soil was banked high against the house. At the top of the window frame we could see an uprooted drain pipe. The floor was littered with smashed hardware. The end of the kitchen towards the house was broken into, and since the daylight shone in there, it was evident that the greater part of the house had collapsed. Contrasting vividly with this ruin was the neat dresser, stained in the fashion, pale green, and with a number of copper and tin vessels below it. The wallpaper imitating blue and white tiles, and a couple of colored supplements fluttering from the walls above the kitchen range. As the dawn grew clearer, we saw through the gap in the wall the body of a Martian standing sentinel, I suppose, over the still glowing cylinder. At the sight of that, we crawled as circumspectly as possible out of the twilight of the kitchen into the darkness of the scullery. Abruptly, the right interpretation dawned upon my mind. "The 5th cylinder," I whispered. "The 5th shot from Mars has struck this house and buried us under the ruins." For a time the curate was silent. Then he whispered, "God have mercy upon us." I heard him presently whimpering to himself. Save for that sound, we lay quite still in the scullery. I, for one part, scarce dared to breathe, and saw with my eyes fixed on the dim, faint light of the kitchen door. I could just see the curate's face, a dim oval shape, and his collar and cuffs. Outside there began a metallic hammering, then a violent hooting, and then again, after a quiet interval, a hissing like the hissing of an engine. These noises, for the most part, seemed problematical, continued intermittently, and seemed, if anything, to increase in number as time wore on. Presently, a measured thudding and a vibration that made everything about us quiver and the vessels in the pantry ring and shift began and continued. Once the light was eclipsed and the ghostly kitchen doorway became absolutely dark, for many hours we must have crouched there, silent and shivering, until our tired attention failed. At last I found myself awake and very hungry. I am inclined to believe that we must have spent the greater portion of the day before that awakening. My hunger was at a stride so insistent that it moved me to action. I told the curate I was going to seek food, and felt my way toward the pantry. He made no answer, but so soon as I began eating, the faint noise I made stirred him up, and I heard him crawling after me. Alright, so now we are done with chapter 1, and the next chapter is what we saw from the ruined house. So, I'd like to say, ¿Cómo estás, ¿Cómo estás, Gigatron? How are you? I have a cursory knowledge of. Oh wait, I do not possess a cursory knowledge of what's it called? A cursory knowledge of Spanish. But welcome to the stream anyway. How are you, man? Okay. So I'm gonna take a sip of my tea. There you go. I gotta ask, in the future when I get a model, I'm gonna ask my, if I had casual clothes, I'm probably gonna ask the casual clothes to have an emotion that's me sipping from my cup. I mean, like, if we're talking about foreign languages, I actually don't know much about foreign languages because I'm monolingual, and that makes me a bit sad compared to my compatriots. But it's okay, I don't really see that a problem, I guess. Alright, what else am I supposed to say? I hope that chapter was good reading. I felt a lot more energized. Sorry. Funny thing is, I assume carbonated drink makes everyone burp. But for me, tea also makes me burp. And I have no idea why. Also, my bottle is just sitting across the bed, and I'm very tempted to grab it. And more information on the room conditions. The aircon is on. The shutters are closed. The lights above me are on. And yeah. There's not much I want to do tonight. Today actually. Maybe I'll cover 2 more chapters. I want to make sure the stream stops before 4:50. At least either I will be able to go for a walk or just, you know, find time, because to solve the character model glitching out, I might run a private test stream for someone to see. Probably just to see if VT Studio running in VT Studio works, and yeah, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem, but it means I will have to progress a little bit in what's it called? I have to progress a little bit in Blood Dragon. I don't know. I'll just see what I want to do tonight, but currently so far I have no problems because I also have because of because of my particular group's meetings, what's it called? I will now have meetings today at 11 p.m. So yes, it's gonna be a bit crowded. So I'm just gonna turn. Wait, who called me? Hold on. Someone called me. I'm gonna be right back. Let me see. I'm gonna set an alarm and then I'm gonna be right back. I wanna see who it is. Well, it wasn't anything important. There was a Chinese man at the end of the phone, and I'm pretty sure he called the wrong number, because who wants to call me, right? I call people. No one calls me, except for my grandparents and my, sorry, I don't have grandparents. I'm getting my own life and the person I replaced life is getting mixed up. I do believe I want to expand on that in the future. It's more like a temporal anomaly. I would like to say, if there's one thing I'd like to add on my character lore, I'm a temporal abnormality at this point. Time has stopped trying to change me, so I'm just a combination of 2 things. So that'll be interesting, isn't it? Yeah, maybe there's a problem with model. I don't know. I don't think it's the model. I think it's just like my computer failing to manage all of the resources properly. Because Blood Dragon I put on Ultra because I thought since it's an old gen game, it should be fine running on Ultra. So like the game was running fine, but I believe the game was taking up a lot of resources. If I ran VTube Studio, right on admin, it should solve this, but I think it will screw up the recording even more. So yes, I just looked up my university email. Oh, okay, it's 15:35, so I guess we can start again. Has it been 5 minutes? I'm not so sure. So it's 15:35, and I just found a university email saying impulse purchasing. I'm gonna talk. I feel like bring this up because you guys know I have a purchasing problem in Modern Warfare, and I have so many skins for that game. I don't know. So yeah, I'm just gonna bring this up because I found it funny that this made my way to my inbox, and because recently I've been trying to see what kind of games I can play for everyone on stream. Before I go on, I do want to state that as much as I enjoy Modern Warfare on the stream and all the weird moments that come with it, I'm gonna definitely do a compilation. I believe you guys, what lol? I know, right? It just came so well timed as well. So, what was I gonna say? I'm probably gonna try and get some new games. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare has just gone on discount, 50% off. So a number of games have gotten off on discount. So what I was saying was I feel like my games are getting a bit too repetitive. Basically, Modern Warfare is fun, and unfortunately there's no good multiplayer games except for Apex and Valorant. Do I want to call Valorant good? I don't even know. So basically, maybe since I got an extra pile of money today, I'll probably invest into like a few games. I'm pretty sure someone by the name of Tofu Boy will be quite happy to please that I might play Toho on stream. Can't believe it. Toho, horror games. What else is there? Strategy games, I guess? I don't know. I just want to see what other good shooter games are there on Steam. So I'll probably just come back to you guys on that when I can. Other than that, there's nothing much I can say except, yeah. I guess I can move on to the next chapter. Oh yeah, I shouldn't be browsing. Why am I browsing Steam? Okay, you know what? Let's just get back to the chapter. Alright. Hurry up. Okay, so now we'll move on to chapter 2, which is what we saw from the ruined house. After eating, we crept back to the scullery, and there I must have dozed again, for when presently I looked around, I was alone. The thudding vibration continued with wearisome persistence. I whispered for the curate several times, and at last felt my way to the door of the kitchen. It was still daylight, and I perceived him across the room, lying against the triangular hole that looked out upon the Martians. His shoulders were hunched, so that his head was hidden from me. I could hear a number of noises almost like in an engine shed, and the place rocked with that beating thud. Through the aperture in the wall, I could see the top of a tree touched with gold, and the warm blue of a tranquil evening sky. For a moment or so I remained watching the curate, and then I advanced, crouching and stepping with extreme care amid the broken crockery that littered the floor. I touched the curate's leg, and he started so violently that a mass of plaster went sliding down outside and fell with a loud impact. I gripped his arm, fearing he might cry out, and for a long time we crouched motionless. Then I turned to see how much of our rampart remained. The detachment of the plaster had left a vertical slit open in the debris, and by raising myself cautiously across a beam, I was able to see out of this gap into what had been overnight a quiet suburban roadway. Vast indeed was the change that we beheld. The fifth cylinder must have fallen right into the midst of the house we had first visited. The building had vanished, completely smashed, pulverized and dispersed by the blow. The cylinder lay far beneath the original foundations, deep in a hole, already vastly larger than the pit I had looked into at Woking. The earth all around it had splashed under that tremendous impact. Splashed is the only word, and lay in heaped piles that hid the masses of the adjacent houses. It had behaved exactly like mud under the violent blow of a hammer. Our house had collapsed backwards. The front portion, even on the ground floor, had been destroyed completely. By a chance, the kitchen and scullery had escaped. and stood buried now under soil and ruins, closed in by tons of earth on every side save towards the cylinder. Over that aspect, we hung now on the very edge of the great circular pit the Martians were engaged in making. The heavy beating sound was evidently just behind us, and ever and again a bright green vapor drove up like a beetle across our peephole. The cylinder was already open in the center of the pit, and on the further edge of the pit, amid the smash and gravel heaped shrubbery, one of the great fighting machines, deserted by its occupant, stood stiff and tall against the evening sky. At first I scarcely noticed the pit and the cylinder, although it has been convenient to describe them first, on account of the extraordinary glittering mechanism I saw busy in excavation, and on account of the strange creatures that were crawling slowly and painfully across the heaped mold near it. The mechanism it certainly was that held my attention first. It was one of those complicated fabrics that have since been called handling machines, and the study of which has already been given such an enormous impetus to terrestrial invention. As it dawned upon me first, it presented some sort of metallic spider with 5 jointed, agile legs, and with an extraordinary number of jointed levers, bars, and reaching and clutching tentacles about its body. Most of its arms were retracted, but 3 long tentacles it was fishing out a number of rods, plates, and bars which lined the covering, and apparently strengthened the walls of the cylinder. These, as it extracted them, were lifted out and deposited upon a level surface of earth behind it. Its motions were so swift, complex, and perfect that at first I did not see it as a machine, in spite of its metallic glitter. The fighting machines were coordinated and animated to an extraordinary pitch, but nothing to compare with this. People who have never seen these structures and have only the ill-imagined efforts of artists or the imperfect descriptions of such eyewitnesses as myself to go upon, scarcely realize that living quantity. I recall particularly the illustrations of one of the first pamphlets to give a consecutive account of the war. The artist had evidently made a hasty study of one of the fighting machines, and there his knowledge ended. He presented them as tilted, stiff tripods without either flexibility or subtlety, and with an altogether misleading monotony of effect. A pamphlet containing these renderings had a considerable vogue, and I mention them here simply to warn the reader against the impression they may have been created. They were no more like the Martians I saw in action than a Dutch doll is like a human being. To my mind, the pamphlet would have been better without them. So, let me just see. A Dutch doll. I'm gonna point this out because I just don't know what a Dutch doll is. Let me see if the image I'm seeing right now in my head is correct. Ah, yes, okay. So it was a pegged wooden doll. So, okay. So that is definitely what I imagined. But I won't show the image here because it might interrupt the reading time. So yes, the Dutch doll is basically just one of those dolls you see back then little girls carrying, and now whoever wants to carry them. So yes, often creepy. Yes, and yeah, I think Annabelle, the famous doll Annabelle, the one that caused a lot of hauntings, is also a Dutch doll. Not sure about that. At first, I say, the handling machine did not impress me as a machine, but as a crab-like creature with a glittering integument. The controlling Martian, whose delicate tentacles actuated its movements, seeming to be simply the equivalent of the crab's cerebral portion. But then I perceived the resemblance of its grey-brown, shiny, leathery integument to that of the other sprawling bodies beyond, and the true nature of this dexterous workman dawned upon me. With that realization, my interest shifted to those other creatures, the real Martians. Already I had a transient impression of those, and the first nausea no longer obscured my observation. Moreover, I was concealed and motionless, and under no urgency of actions. They were, I now saw, the most unearthly creatures it is possible to conceive. They were huge round bodies, or rather heads, about 4 feet in diameter, each body having in front of its face. This face had no nostrils. Indeed, the Martians did not seem to have any sense of smell, but had a pair of very large, dark-colored eyes, and just beneath this was a kind of fleshy beak. In the back of this head or body, I scarcely know how to speak of it, was a single type tympanic surface, since known ought to be anatomically an ear, though it must have been almost useless in our denser air. In a group around the mouth were 16 slender, almost whip-like tentacles, arranged in 2 bunches of 8 each. These bunches have since been named rather aptly by the distinguished anatomist Professor House, the hands. Even as I saw these Martians for the first time, they seemed to be endeavoring to raise themselves on these hands. But of course, with the increased weight of terrestrial conditions, this was impossible. There is reason to suppose that on Mars they may have progressed upon them with some facility. The internal anatomy, I may remark here, as dissection has since shown, was almost equally simple. The greater part of the structure was the brain, sending enormous nerves to the eyes, ear, and tactile tentacles. Beside this were the bulky lungs, into which the mouth opened, and the heart and its vessels. The pulmonary distress caused by the denser atmosphere and greater gravitational attraction was only too evident in the convulsive movements of the outer skin. And this was the sum of the Martian organs. Strange as it may seem to a human being, all the complex apparatus of digestion, which makes up the bulk of our bodies, did not exist in the Martians. They were hits, merely hits. Entrails they had none. Did not eat, much less digest. Instead, they took the fresh, living blood of other creatures and injected it into their own veins. I have myself seen this being done, as I shall mention in its place, but squeamish as I may seem, I cannot bring myself to describe what I could not I could not endure even to continue watching. Let it suffice to say, blood obtained from a still living animal, in most cases a human being, was run directly by a means of a little pipette into the recipient canal. The bare idea of this is no doubt horribly repulsive to us, but at the same time, I think that we should remember how repulsive our carnivorous habits would seem to an intelligent rabbit. The physiological advantage of the practice of injections are undeniable, if one thinks of the tremendous waste of human time and energy occasioned by eating and the digestive process. Our bodies are half made up of glands and tubes and organs, occupied in turning heterogeneous food into blood. The digestive processes and their reaction upon the nervous system sap our strength and color our mind. Men go happy or miserable as they have healthy or unhealthy livers or sound gastric glands. But the Martians were lifted above all these organic fluctuations of mood and emotion. Their undeniable preference for men as their source of nourishment is partly explained by the nature of the remains of the victims they had brought with them as provision from Mars. These creatures, to judge from the shriveled remains that had fallen into human hands, were bipeds with flimsy, siliceous skeletons, almost like those of the siliceous sponges, and feeble musculature. Thing about 6 feet high, they had round erect heads and large eyes in flinty sockets. 2 or 3 of these seemed to have been brought in each cylinder, and all were killed before Earth was reached. It was just as well for them, for the mere attempt to stand upright upon our planet would have broken every bone in their bodies. While I engage with this description, I may add in this place certain further details which, although they were not all evidence to us at the time, will enable the reader who is unacquainted them to form a clear picture of these offensive creatures. In 3 other points, their physiology differed strangely from ours. Their organisms did not sleep, any more than the heart of man sleeps. Since they had no extensive muscular mechanism to recuperate, their periodical extinction was unknown to them. They had little to or no sense of fatigue, it would seem. On Earth they would have never moved without effort, but yet even to the last they kept in action. In 24 hours they did 24 hours of work, as even on Earth is perhaps the case with ants. In the next place, wonderful as it seems, in a sexual world, the Martians were absolutely without sex, and therefore without any of the tumultuous emotions that arise from that difference amongst men. A young Martian, there can be now no dispute, was really born upon Earth during war, and he was found attached to his parents, partially budded off, just as a young lily bud off, or like the young animals in a freshwater polyp. In man and all higher terrestrial animals, such a method of increase has disappeared. But even on this earth, it was certainly a primitive method. Among the lower animals, up even to those first cousins of the vertebrate animals, the tunicates, the two processes occur side by side, but finally the sexual method superseded its competitor altogether. On Mars, however, just the reverse had apparently been the case. What is a tunicate? Sorry. I'm going to expand on this because I don't know what a tunicate is. Give me a second. Tunicate. Oh! Sea squirts. Okay. So it's just meaning like he just kind of meant like those things you see underwater. Yeah, that's just creepy. I don't even know how to describe this. It's like an alien. So yes, tunicates are just kind of like worm things, I guess. Okay, so let me just see. Where did we stop? Okay, let me just see here. And this was this. Oh wait, hold on. The internal anatomy, I may remark here, as dissection has since shown, was almost equally simple. The greater part of the structure was the brain, sending enormous nerves to the eyes, ears, and wait, what? Hold on, tentacles. Kate, welcome. You're supposed to be resting. You're supposed to be resting. Go take a day off, or I'm just gonna bang. I'm gonna bonk you in the head like bonk, like a bonk. I don't have any hammer. Hashtag let my mod rest. Okay, sorry, I read from the wrong part. Let's start again. It was worthy of remark that a certain speculative writer of quasi-scientific repute, not writing long before the Martian invasion, that forecast for man a final structure not unlike the actual Martian condition. His prophecy, I remember, appeared in November or December 1893 in a long defunct publication, the Pall Mall Budget, and I recall a character of it in a pre-Martian periodical called Punch. He pointed out, writing in a foolish, fictitious tone, that the perfection of mechanical appliances must ultimately supersede limbs, the perfection of chemical devices, digestion, that such organs as hair, external noses, teeth, ears, and chins were no longer essential parts of the human being, and that the tendency of natural selections would lie in the direction of their steadily diminution through the coming ages. The brain alone remained the cardinal necessity. Only one other part of the body had a strong case for survival, and that was the hand, teacher and agent of the brain. While the rest of the body dwindled, the hands would grow larger. There is many a true word written in jest, and here in the Martians we have beyond dispute the accomplishment of such a suppression of the animal side of the organism by the intelligence. To me, it was quite credible that the Martians may be descended from beings not unlike ourselves by the gradual development of our brain and hands, the latter giving rise to the blue bunches and delicate tentacles at last, at the expense of the brain and the rest of the body. Without the body, the brain would, of course, become a mere selfish intelligence, without any of the emotional substratum of the human being. The last salient point in which the systems of these creatures different from ours was in what one might have thought a very trivial particular. Microorganisms, which cause so much disease and pain on Earth, have never appeared upon Mars, or Martian sanitary science eliminated them ages ago. 100 diseases, all the fevers and contagions of human life, consumptions, cancers, tumors, and such morbidities never entered the scheme of their life. And speaking of differences between the life on Mars and the terrestrial life, I may allude here to the curious suggestions of the red weed. Apparently, the vegetable kingdom on Mars, instead of having green for a dominant color, is of a vivid blood red tint. At any rate, the Martians the seeds which the Martians, intentionally or accidentally, brought with them gave rise in all cases to red-colored growths, only that known popularly as the red weed, however, gained any footing in competition with terrestrial forms. The red creeper was quite a transitory growth, and few people have seen it growing. For a time, however, the red wheat grew with astonishing vigor and luxuriance. It spread up to the size of the pit by the third or fourth day of our imprisonment, and its cactus-like branches formed the carmine fringes to the edges of our triangular window. And afterwards, I found it broadcast throughout the country, and especially when there was a stream of water. The Martians had what appeared to be an auditory organ, a single round drum at the back of their head body, and eyes with a visual range not very different from ours, except according to them, that, according to Phillips, blue and violet were as black to them. It was commonly supposed that they communicated by sounds and testicular tentacular gesticulations. This is asserted, for instance, in the able but hastily compiled pamphlets, written evidently by someone not an eyewitness of Martian actions, to which I have already alluded, and which, so far, has been the chief source of information concerning them. Now no surviving human being saw so much of the Martians' actions as I did. I take no credit to myself for an accident, but the fact is so. And I assert that I watched them closely time after time, and that I have seen 4, 5, and once 6 of them sluggishly performing the most elaborately complicated operations together without either sound or gesture. That particular hooting invariably preceded feeding. It had no modulation, and was, I believe, in no sense a signal, but merely the expiration of air preparatory to the suctional operation. I have a certain claim to at least an elementary knowledge of psychology, and in this matter I am convinced, as firmly as I am convinced of anything, that the Martians interchange thoughts without any physical intermediation. And I have been convinced of this in spite of strong preoccupation. Before the Martian invasion, as an occasional reader here or there may remember, I had written with some vehemence against the telepathic theory. The Martians wore no clothing. Their conceptions of ornament and decorum were necessarily different from ours, and not only were they evidently much less sensible of changes of temperature than we were, but changes of pressure did not seem to have affected their health at all seriously. Yet though they wore no clothing, it was in the other artificials to their bodily resources that their great superiority over man lay. We men, with our bicycles and road stakes, our lilienthal soaring machines, our guns and sticks, and so forth, are just in the beginning of the evolutions that the Martians have worked out. They have become practically mere brains, wearing different bodies according to their needs, and just as men wear suits of clothes and take a bicycle in a hurry or an umbrella in the wet. And of their appliances, nothing is more wonderful to a man than the curious fact that what is a dominant feature in almost all human devices is absent. The wheel is absent. Among all the things they brought to earth, there is no trace or suggestion of their use of wheels. One would have at least expected it in locomotion. And in this connection, it is curious to remark that even on this earth, nature has never hit upon the wheel, or has preferred other expedients to its development. And not only did the Martians either not know of, which is incredible, or abstain from the wheel, but their apparatus singularly little use is made of the fixed pivot, or relatively fixed pivot, with circular motions terribly confined to one plane. Almost all the joints of the machinery present in a complicated system of sliding parts moving over but beautifully curved friction bearings. And while upon this matter of details, it is remarkable that the long leverages of their machines are in most cases actuated by a sort of sham musculature of discs in an elastic sheath. These discs become polarized and drawn closely and powerfully together when traversed by a current of electricity. In this way, the curious parallelism to animal motions, which was so striking and disturbing to the human beholder, was attained. Such quasi-muscles abounded in the crab-like handling machine, which on my first peeping out of the slip, I watched unpacking that cylinder. It seemed infinitely more alive than the actual Martians laying up beyond it in the sunset, panting, stirring effectual tentacles, and moving feebly after their vast journey across space. While I was still watching their sluggish motions in the sunlight, and noting each strange detail of their form, the curate reminded me of his presence
by pulling violently at my arm. He turned to a scowling face and silent, eloquent lips. He wanted the slit, which permitted only one of us to peek through, and so I had to forego watching them for a time while he enjoyed that privilege. When I looked again, the busily handing machine had already put together several pieces of apparatus that he had taken down of a cylinder into a shape having an unmistakable likeness to its own. And down on the left, a busy little digging mechanism had come into view, emitting jets of vapor and working its way around the pit, excavating and embanking in a methodical and discriminating manner. This it was which had caused the regular beating noise and the rhythmic shocks that had kept our ruinous refuge quivering. It piped and whistled as it worked. So far as I could see, the thing was without a directing Martian at all. Alright, there you go. That's it for this chapter. We can move on to chapter 3 in a bit. Give me a second, I will disappear. I'm gonna get some water. Okay, I'm back. Accidentally took a power nap instead. Was expecting to be down a long time. Ah, yeah, that kind of happens. I was like, after my second dose, I had like a power nap and that's it. I was lethargic, but nothing came out of it. Also, my life today is lagging. Is it? I should really start considering to run this program in. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix it real quick. I will turn off VTube Studio real quick, and then I'll try and launch it again in admin mode. Let me see if it's possible to run it in admin mode. Also, Kathy, I hope you're doing fine by the way. Oh shit. If I can run it in admin mode, I think if I can run it in admin mode, right, that would fix a lot of problems. Unpin from start. Let me see. Open. How do I do this really? I'm splendid, thanks for asking. No problem, Akate. How do I run this in admin mode? Run as an administrator. Give me a second. How do I run this? VTube Studio and admin studio. Okay, so by the way, I'm just gonna make comments while I'm fixing up. What's it called? What is it called already? I was gonna say that this chapter is very rife in strange descriptions of the Martian biology. By all means, it's completely fine, but I find it very strange that he had to make obtuse references to, you know, the sex. I mean, it's not all that bad, but still, it just felt weird. So yeah, I can't seem to open this program in admin mode. That's weird. Can I run it in admin mode? Why is it not letting me run in admin mode? Let me see. It doesn't work without admin access. Okay, so yeah, I'm just figuring out everything else. So I'm sorry. I guess I can't run this in admin mode for now. So yeah, that's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? Anyway, I was gonna say this chapter is incredibly strange because it does describe the Martians in great detail, but it's very self-deprecating and very Wellesian, I guess, because let me just pop by here. Hello? Ah, there you go. So yeah, apparently I can't just release it. I can't make this what's it called already? What's it called? I can't run this program in admin mode, which is kind of sad. So yeah, that's a bummer. Don't know why though. Pretty sure if I would, yeah, I can run SNAS as a admin mode, but I don't know why VT Studio can't be run in admin mode. So yeah, probably it's just two things conflicting. Anyway, what I was saying before I go on is that this chapter is a bit slightly strange and very wonderful because Wells has a very vivid imagination, which I strive for. In writing the descriptions on the Martians, he probably will today, if it was written, it would probably be more simpler. But here he goes into such detailedness that it seems very self-absorbent, but if taking a closer look, it's very detailed to the point where he can construct a reasonably Martian life form. Of course, now it's outdated by current scientific beliefs and studies. But however, yeah, basically, basically, the imagination that he shows in describing the Martians and the many machines they have, which is surprising because for one, in the movie, which is the Steven Spielberg movie, War of the Machines, there was only one kind of machine, the tripods, and that's it, nothing else. Here we see flying machines, we see 2 tripods, we see a digging machine and a smaller digging machine, plus the cylinder. So we get a full overview of a Martian culture on Earth, as well as another species which showed up in the ship did. And I'm gonna say it's also a bit awkward because it's quite clear, like he's not even hiding it. This is quite clearly Wells talking, because you can kind of see how he says he lambasts what's it called? He lambasts the telepathic theory. That kind of pronoun. There's this heart referring to himself as an I. It's pretty much clearly giving it away that this guy that not only is the story told from after war perspective, but from his perspective, because no other person would come up with such a narcissistic way of describing other publications as fictitious or otherwise unscientific. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. This chapter is mostly dedicated to it's just more what's it called? More suited to just describing the physiology of the future. There's no character development here. We're just talking about the aliens in a very concise and accurate form. So that's a good thing. If you want to describe any antagonist that seems very inhuman, follow the Martian advice. But remember, modern times call for modern sensibilities. I'm pretty sure if any kid read this, it'll be boring as hell because he talks way too much, and I can agree with that. It's very very self-conscious. If you want to make a description of an alien creature, keep it sharp, snappy, and most likely not have it kill you, like how I write my Sunset War stories, basically. Self-advertising for my own writing in my own stream. That's just fantastic. Alright, so 5 minutes have passed. I think we can cover the last chapter for today, which is the Days of Imprisonment. We're already moving on stories so pretty fast anyway. So, the Days of Imprisonment. The arrival of a second fighting machine drove us from our people into the scullery, for we feared that from his elevation the Martian might see down upon us behind the bearing. At the later date, we began to feel less in danger of their eyes, for to have an eye in the dazzle of the sunlight outside our refuge must have been blank blackness. But at first the slightest suggestion of approach drove us into the scullery in heart-throbbing retreat. Yet terrible was the danger we incurred, the attraction of peeping was for both of us irresistible. And I recall now with a sort of wonder that, in spite of the infinite danger in which we were between starvation and a still more terrible death, we could yet struggle bitterly for that horrible privilege of sight. We would race across the kitchen in a grotesque way between eagerness and the dread of making a noise, and strike each other, and thrust and kick, within a few inches of exposure. The fact is that we had absolutely incompatible dispositions and habits of thought and action, and our danger and isolation only accentuated that incompatibility. At Halliford, I had already come to hate the curate's trick of helpless exclamation, his stupid rigidity of mind, his endless muttering monologues of vitiated every effort I made to think out a line of action, and drove me, at times, thus pent up and intensified, almost to the verge of craziness. He was as lacking in restraint as a silly woman. Sexist. He would read for hours altogether, and I verily believe that to the very ends, this spoiled child of life thought his weak tears in some ways efficacious, and I would sit in the darkness, unable to keep my mind off him by reason of his importunities. He ate more than I did, and it was in vain I pointed out that our only chance of life was to stop in the house until the Martians had done with their pit. That in the long patience a time might presently come where we should need food. He ate and drank impulsively in heavy meals at long intervals. He slept little. As the days wore on, his utter carelessness of any consideration so intensified our distress and danger that I had, much as I loathed it, resort to threats, and at last to blows. That brought him to reason for a time, but he was one of those weak creatures, void of pride, timorous, anemic, hateful souls, full of shifty cunning, who face neither God nor man, who face not even themselves. It is disagreeable for me to recall and write these things, but I set them down that my story may lack nothing. Those who have escaped the dark and terrible aspects of life will find my brutality, my flash of rage in our final tragedy, easy enough to blame, for they know what is wrong as well as any, but not what is possible to tortured men. But those who have been under the shadow, who had gone down at last to elemental things, will have wider charity. And while within we fought out our dark dim contest of whispers, snatched food and drinks and terrible gripping hands and blows, without, in the pitiless sunlight of that terrible June, was the strange wonder, the unfamiliar routine of the Martians in the pit. Let me return to those first news experiences of mine. After a long time I had ventured back to the people, to find that the newcomers had been reinforced by the occupants of no fewer than 3 of the fighting machines. These last had brought with them certain fresh appliances that stood in an orderly manner about the cylinder. The second handling machine was now completed, and was busy in serving one of the novel contrivances the big machine had brought. This was a body resembling a milk can in its general form, above which oscillated a pear-shaped receptacle, and from which a stream of white powder flowed into a circular basin below. The oscillatory motion was imparted to this by one tentacle of the handling machine. With 2 spatula hands, the handling machine was digging out and flinging masses of clay into the pear-shaped receptacle above, while with another arm it periodically opened the door and removed rusty and blackened clinkers from the middle part of the machine. Another steely tentacle directed the powder from the basin along a ribbed channel towards some receiver that was hidden from me by the mound of bluish dust. From this unseen receiver, a little thread of green smoke rose vertically into the quiet air. As I looked, the handling machine, with a faint and musical clinking, extended telescopic fashion, a tentacle that had been a moment before a mere blunt projection, until its end was hidden behind the mound of clay. In another second it had lifted a bar of white aluminium into sight, untarnished as yet, and shining dazzlingly, and deposited it in a growing stack of bars that stood at the side of the pit. Between sunset and starlight, this dexterous machine must have made more than 100 such bars out of crude clay, and the mound of bluish dust rose steadily until it topped the side of the pit. The contrast between the swift, complex movements of these contrivances and the inert, panting clumsiness of their masters was acute, and for days I had to tell myself repeatedly that these latters were indeed the living of the two things. The curate had possession of the slit when the first men were brought to the pit. I was sitting below, huddled up, listening with all my ears. He made a sudden movement backwards, and I, fearful that we were observed, crouched in a spasm of terror. He came sliding down the rubbish and crept beside me in the darkness, inarticulate, gesticulating, and for a moment I shared his panic. His gesture suggested a resonation of the slit, and after a little while my curiosity gave me courage, and I rose up, stepped across him, and clambered up to it. At first I would see no reason for this frantic behavior. The twilight had now come, the stars were little and faint, but the pit was illuminated by the flickering green fire that came from the aluminium making. The whole picture was a flickering scheme of green gleams and shifting rusty black shadows, strangely trying to the eyes. Over and through it all went the bats, heeding it not at all. The sprawling Martians were no longer to be seen, the mound of blue-green powder that had risen to cover them from sight. and a fighting machine, with his legs contracted, crumpled, and abbreviated, stood across the corner of the pit. Then, amid the clangor of machinery, came a drifting suspicion of human voices that I entertained at first only to dismiss. I crouched, watching this fighting machine closely, citing myself now for the first time that the hood did indeed contain a Martian. As the green flames lifted, I could see the oily gleam of his integument and the brightness of his eyes. And suddenly I heard a yell and saw a long tentacle reaching over the shoulder of the machine to the little cage that hung upon its back. Then something struggling violently was lifted high against the sky, a vague enigma against the starlight. And as this black object came down again, I saw by the green brightness that it was a man. For an instant he was clearly visible. He was a stout, ruddy, middle-aged man, well-dressed, 3 days before he must have been walking the world. A man of considerable consequence. I could see his staring eyes and gleam of light behind of his studs and watched him. He vanished behind the mount, and the moment there was silence. And then began a shrieking, and a sustained and cheerful hooting from the Martians. I slid down from the rubbish, struggled to my feet, clapped my hands over my ears, and bolted to the scullery. And the curate, who had been crouching silently with his arms over his head, looked up as I passed, cried loudly at my desertion of him, and came running after me. That night, as we lurked in the sculleries, balanced between our horror and the terrible fascination this peeping had, although I had felt the need of action, I tried in vain to conceive some plan of action. But afterwards, during the second day, I was able to consider our position with great clearness. The curate, I found, was quite incapable of discussion. This new and culminating atrocity had robbed him of all vestiges of reason or forethought. Practically, he had sunk to the level of an animal. But, as the saying goes, I gripped myself with both hands. It grew upon my mind, once I could face the facts, that terrible as our position was, there was no justification for absolute despair. Our chief chance lay in the possibility of the Martians making the pit nothing more than a temporary encampment. Or, even if they kept it permanently, they might not consider it necessary to guard it, and a chance of escape might be afforded to us. I also weighed very carefully the possibility of our digging a way out in a direction away from the pit. But our chances of emerging within sight of some sentinel fighting machine seemed at first too great. Okay, someone just pinged me. And I should have had to do all the digging myself. The curate would have certainly failed me. It was on the third day, if my memory serves me right, that I saw the lad killed. It was the only occasion on which I actually saw the Martians feed. After that experience, I followed the hole in the wall for the better part of the day. I went into the scullery, removed the door, and spent some hours digging with my hatchet as silently as possible. But when I made the hole about a couple of feet deep, the loose earth collapsed noisily, and I did not dare continue. I lost heart and laid down on the scullery floor for a long time, having no spirit even to move. After that, I abandoned altogether the idea of escaping by excavation. It says much for the impression the Martians made upon me that at first I entertained little to no hope of our escape being brought about by their overthrow through any human effort. But on the fourth or fifth night, I heard a sound like heavy guns. It was very late in the night, and the moon was shining brightly. The Martians had taken away the excavating machine, and save for a firing machine that stood on the remoter bank of the pit, and a handling machine that busied out of my sight in the corner of a pit immediately beneath my peat hole, the place was deserted by them. Except for a pale glow from the handling machine and the bars and patches of white moonlight, the pit was in darkness. And except for the clinking and handling of the handling machine, quite still. That night was a beautiful serenity, save for one planet. The moon seemed to have the sky to herself. I heard a dog howling, and that familiar sound it was that made me listen. Then I heard quite distinctly a booming exactly like the sound of great guns. 6 distant reports I counted, and after a long interval 6 again, and that was all. Oh, that was a short one. Okay, so that was the 3rd chapter. I think the chapters are getting really short now. Okay, so I guess since it is 4:30, I guess we can go for one more stream. I guess one more stream. I guess we can go for one more I guess I'll go for one more what's it called, chapter, and then after that we can stop. Okay, someone wanted to go into the room. It was the dog. That's a dog. What's the dog doing? There's not much I can say. So that was an interesting chapter. At least now we get to see the Martians feeding. And I think, as much as I say I'm not dazed by scary things feeding on people, it's still that kind of human sense of despair when you see one of your own kind being murdered or eaten. I think the eaten one is getting even worse because you see yourself as food now. Said Bugsty. So yes, the curate, I think, as the chapter name says, the curate will die next chapter. So far it's like Wells is like the survivor, the analyzer, and then the curate is just like the annoying kid that you keep along with you because why not? Are there any observations on the new chapter that I may have missed? I'm not so sure as well. Okay, I was just looking at VTB. Haniro Momoko was inside, but not me. I don't really know. My mind is blank. I'm like taking a rest right now, but I don't really know what I can talk about right now. I wish I could make a plastic bottle acid for myself. You know, one thing I noticed about my model, I'm not sure if the things underneath my eyes are intentional, but I do have some sort of a small eye bag and I like it. In fact, I'm permanently tired of everything. And yeah, I mean, there's not much I can say, at least. Say except don't know what to say. These are the 5 minutes where I just spend doing nothing. I wish I could do something in the meantime, but eh. Okay, so tonight if I was privy to a test stream, I might just run an hour of Risk of Rain 2 and just see how the frame rate handles. Just a test stream, you don't have to come and see it. I want to see on my another computer and see if the model is lagging. If it is lagging, yeah, it's gonna be a bit of an issue for me. I really feel bad for any new guys coming in that they have to deal with my random shit, random technical mishaps, and I really do not like having to put anyone through it. So yeah, I really want to make sure I get the good first impression, because 5 minutes of Dylus blinking and vibings, yeah, kind of like that, but I don't know. I feel like as a VTuber I should be doing more. What is more exactly? I don't know. I've already asked this question so many times to you guys, and I feel like it's getting very tired and boring. I'm gonna check my finances for a little bit. Yes, there we go. Cha 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 cha. Oh, okay, the dogs really want to come in. Why though? Sakate, any more side effects? It's almost the 5 minutes is almost up. Any more side effects on your end? I really hope there isn't, because I'm gonna be real sad. Okay. Ugh. Oh, that was bad. Speaking of COVID, right? I start responding to the my Sajatra's COVID response, COVID guidelines, because I think it's more than 2 weeks already. There's no side effects, no worries. Okay, no problem. I myself have not been keeping track of my treatment because I think it's no longer time for me to do vaccine checkups. So yeah, I just need to wait a few more months if I am fully immunized to the fully immune to disease. May need to have booster shots in between. Don't know, but it's okay. All right, 5 minutes is up. Let's move on to the final chapter for today, which is the death of the curate. Finally, this annoying prick dies. It was on the 6th day of our imprisonment that I peeped for the last time, and presently found myself alone. Instead of keeping close to me and trying to oust me from the slit, the curate had gone back into the scullery. I was struck by the sudden thought. I went back quickly and quietly into the scullery. In the darkness, I heard the curate drinking. I snatched in the darkness, and my fingers caught a bottle of burgundy. For a few minutes there was a tussle. The bottle struck the floor and broke, and I desisted and rose. We stood panting, threatening each other. In the end, I planted myself between him and the food, and told him of my determination to begin the discipline. I divided the food in the pantry into rations, the last of 10 days. I will not let him eat any more that day. In the afternoon, he made a feeble attempt to get at the food. But I had been dozing, but in an instant I was awake. All day and all night we sat face to face. I, wary but resolute, and he, weeping and complaining of his immediate hunger. It was, I know, a night and a day, but it seems now, an interminable length of time. And so our widened incompatibility lasted at last in open conflict. For 2 vast days, we struggled in undertones and wrestling contests. There were times where I beat and kicked him madly, times where I cajoled and persuaded him, and once I tried to bribe him with the last bottle of burgundy, for there was a rainwater pump with which I could get water. But neither force nor kindness availed. He was indeed beyond reason. He would neither desist from his attacks on the food nor from his noisy babbling to himself. The rudimentary precautions to keep our imprisonments endurable he would not observe. Slowly I began to realize the complete overthrow of intelligence, to perceive that my sole companion in this close and sickness darkness was a man insane. From certain vague memories, I am inclined to think my own mind my own mind wandered at times. I had strange and hideous dreams whenever I slept. It sounds paradoxical, but I am inclined to think that the weakness or insanity of the curate warned me, braced me, and kept me a sane man. On the 8th day, he began to talk aloud instead of whispering, and nothing I could do moderate his speech. It was just, oh God, he would say over and over again. It is just. On me and mine be the punishment laid. We have sinned. We have fallen short. There was poverty, sorrow. The poor were trodden in the dust, and I held my peace. I preached acceptable folly. My God, what folly! When I should have stood up, though I died for it, and called upon them to repent. Repent! Oppressors of the poor and needy, the winepress of God. Then he would suddenly revert to the manner of the food I withheld from him, praying, begging, weeping, at last threatening. He began to raise his voice. I prayed him not to. He perceived a hold on me. He threatened he would shout and bring the Martians upon us. For a time that scared me, but any concessions would have shortened our chance of escape beyond estimating. I defied him, although I felt no assurance that he might not do the same thing. But at that day, at any rate, he did not. He talked, with his voice rising slowly, through the greater part of the 8th and 9th days. Yeah, the dog really wants to come in the room. Threats, entreaties, mingled with a torrent of half-sane and always frothy repentance for his vacant sham of God's service, such as made me pity him. Then he slept a while, and began with renewed strength, so loudly that I must needs make him desist. Be still, I implored. He rose to his knee, for he had been sitting in the darkness near the copper. I had been still too long, he said, in a tone that must have reached in the pit. And now I must bear witness! Woe unto this unfaithful city! Woe! 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 To the inhabitants of the earth! by reason of the other voices of the trumpet. Shut up, I said, rising to my feet, in a terror lest the Martians should hear us. For God's sake, nay, shouted the curate at the top of his voice, standing likewise and expanding his arms. Speak! The word of the Lord is upon me. In three strides he was at the door leading into the kitchen. I must bear witness. I go. It has already been too long delayed. I put out my hand and met the meat chopper hanging to the wall. In a flash I was after him. I was fierce with fear. Before he was halfway across the kitchen, I had overtaken him. With one last touch of humanity, I turned the blade back and struck him with the butt. He went headlong and lay stretched on the ground. I stumbled over him and stood panting. He lay still. Suddenly I heard a noise without, the run and smash of slipping plaster, and the triangular aperture in the wall was darkened. I looked up and saw the lower surface of the handing machine coming slowly across the hole. One of its gripping limbs curled amid the debris. Another limb appeared, feeling its way across way over the fallen beams. I stood petrified, staring. And then I saw through a sort of glass plate near the edge of the body, the face, as you may call it, and the large dark eyes of a Martian, peering, and then a long metallic snail of tentacle came feeding slowly through the hole. I turned by an effort, stumbled over the curate, and stopped at the scullery door. The tentacle was now some way, 2 yards or more, in the room, and twisting and turning, with queer sudden movements, this way and that. For a while I stood fascinated by that slow, fitful advance. Then with a faint, hoarse cry, I forced myself across the scullery. I trembled violently. I could scarcely stand upright. I opened the door of the coal cellar and stood there in the darkness, staring at the faintly lit doorway of the kitchen, and listening. Had the Martian seen me? What was it doing now? Something was moving to and fro there, very quietly. Every now and then it tapped against the wall, or started on its movement with a faint metallic ringing, like the movement of keys on a split ring. Then a heavy body, I knew too well what, was dragged across the floor of the kitchen towards the opening. Irresistibly attracted, I crept to the door and peeped into the kitchen. In the triangle of bright outer sunlight, I saw the Martian in the briarius of a handling machine, scrutinizing the curate's head. Hold on, give me a second. What is a briarius? Yeah, this is one of those sessions where I read about weird words. What is a briarius? This is an opportunity for us to what the hell? One of the 300-armed, 50-headed hackathon child. Oh, this is a Greek thing, but what does this have to do? 100-armed, 50-headed thing. How do you have so many heads? That's crazy. So many heads. So yeah, there's just a lot of things. So this is just basically a Greek thing. So yes. Okay, so basically yes, and now we can continue on because now we know what a bird. Scrutinizing the I thought at once it would infer my presence from the mark of the blow I had given him. I crept back to the coal cellar, shut the door, and began to cover myself up as much as I could, and as noisily as possible in the darkness, among the firewood and the coal therein. Every now and then I paused, rigid, to hear if the Martian had thrust its tentacle through the opening again. Then the faint metallic jingle returned. I traced it slowly, feeling across over the kitchen. Presently I heard it nearer, in the scullery, as I had judged. I thought that its line might be insufficient to reach me. I prayed copiously. It passed, scraping faintly across the cellar door. And then an age of almost intolerable suspense intervened. Then I heard it fumbling at the latch. And I found the door. The Martians understood doors. They worried at the catch for a minute, perhaps. Then the door opened. In the darkness, I could just see the thing, like an elephant's trunk more than anything else, waving towards me and touching and examining the walls. wood and ceiling. It was like a black worm swaying its blind head to and fro. Once even, it touched the heel of my boot. I was on the verge of screaming. I bit my hand. For a time, the tentacle was silent. I could have fancied it had been withdrawn. Presently, with an run-up click, it gripped on something. I thought it had me, and seemed to go out the cellar again. For a minute, I was not sure. Apparently, it had taken a lump of coal to examine. I seized the opportunity of slightly shifting my position, which had become cramped, then listened. I whispered passionate prayers for safety. Then I heard the slow, deliberate sound creeping towards me. Again, slowly it drew near, scratching against the walls and tapping the furniture. While I was still doubtful, it rapped smartly against the cellar door and closed it. I heard it go into the pantry, and the biscuit tins rattled and the bottle smashed. Then there came a heavy bump against the cellar door. Then silence that passed into an infinity of suspense. Had it gone? At last, I decided that it had. I came into the scullery no more, but I lay all the 10 day in the close darkness, buried among coals and firewood, not daring to even crawl out for the drink on which I craved. It was the 11th day before I ventured so far from my security. Okay, so this ends chapter 4. Very short, and as appropriate as I could, and the curate is dead, probably eaten by the Martians. And what can I learn? Except don't go crazy when there's a bunch of aliens above you, man. Don't go crazy. Right, so with that, I believe we can end the stream for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the chat. Hope you mercs enjoyed the reading stream. And as much as I can say, it was really fun just seeing like the descriptive nature of how Wells this like the annoying guy. Yeah, exactly. He was just like annoying, and although I don't blame him, again, the curate himself, as I said before, is just how some normal people react in the face of overwhelming fear. They'll go crazy. But I guess Wells did a very good job of putting in the fact that he's annoying as shit and will kill him. Will probably have killed the narrator if it wasn't for his abrupt timing with the butt chandler. He didn't directly kill him, but he did indirectly kill a man. Have courage. This man has courage. And I feel bad for him, honestly, having to resort to that situation. There are people like the curate out there, just remember, and they won't always react to like do all these stimuli well. There are some people who can rise to the occasion, and then there's some people who turn crazy. Some will just turn into blubbering messes, and some will just try to take advantage of it. So yeah, I guess the curate's character is, well, in Wells's essence, just someone who is stupid and dumb. Basically, because Wells is very vicious of his criticisms of the curate, and his mad ravings about God could be seen as an insult, seen as a criticism of men of the church. But that could be just me. But other than that, well, he's dead. We can't do much about it. And the next chapter, chapter 5, that means we are now 4 chapters away from the end of War of the Worlds. And after that, I'm just gonna have to pick a new book already. So yeah, but before that time comes, I'll probably put a poll up and ask which story are we going to do. And for now, yeah, that's pretty much it to the stream. I don't have anything else planned for the day except for a testing stream I might do just to make sure my Live 2D doesn't lag for future installments, because if it lags, I'm probably gonna have to get a better computer. Either a better computer or just lower down all my graphic settings, because man, graphic settings are a bitch. I gotta start learning to run all my games on medium just to stream. This is sad. I just want to run my games on high fidelity. Like, I wanted to play Jurassic World on high fidelity, show you the dinosaurs, but nope, doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't work like that. So basically, yes, that's it. RTX moment. I mean, I wouldn't mind buying an RTX, but I don't know, in this weather, I want to start saving money. So basically on my checklist, once I'm done with a certain few things, there is model, character sheet, what's it? On my checklist, there is the what's it called? The recordings, which is I want to do on my own. More stories I want to write for the Sunset War, and at least a few more character stories. And then after that will be the character sheet for the new appearance, and then after that model, And then after that, I don't know, something new, I guess. Maybe I'll just try and get someone to do a new loading screen. I was thinking of having a loading screen that was just me working in the workshop, just looping endlessly with the clock in the background, because that would be fun. It's like pretty nice. But I could always do it myself, but I'm not very good at drawing, aren't I? Anyway, yes, thank you all for joining my stream. Yeah. Next week is writing week. Haniro Momoko's on hiatus, so unfortunately we can't get her to join us. And with that, nothing much to say. This marks the end of the official streams planned for this week. Tomorrow is, as I say again, a break day, so I won't be able, and I will be doing my pet grooming lessons. So I hope you guys have a good one today, and you, Akati, get some good rest. I'm very touched to see that you managed to make it to my stream, despite you needing to rest. Alright, so with that, glory be a day, mercs, and have a good one. Bye bye.